Hey there, welcome back to Color and Scribbles. My name is Rachel, and today we are going to talk about gesture drawing, which I am very excited to talk about because gesture drawing is one of my favorite exercises, and I think that it is a very useful tool and practice to incorporate into your figure drawing. So if you are somebody who is interested in drawing people, or if you feel like you just want something extra to add to your drawing arsenal, definitely stay tuned. We are going to talk about what gesture drawing is, why it's useful, and also some tips on how to do it better. A gesture drawing is a very quick sketch that you use to capture the overall essence of your subject. Now, technically this could be applied to any subject, so you could do a gesture of a building or a gesture of an animal, but most frequently it's applied to figure drawing, so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now with figure drawing, a gesture is usually used to capture the whole pose very quickly. Usually you'll spend just a minute or two trying to capture the entire pose, not focusing on any details, not focusing on facial features, fingers, toes, nothing like that. You're just trying to capture where the limbs are oriented, how the torso is twisted, and just how the overall pose is flowing. This can be a really good way to start a larger piece, so if you're going to be doing a big painting or a bigger drawing, starting with a gesture can help you keep the piece loose and sketchy in the early stages, and it can also help you get the entire pose on the page without getting too caught up in details early on. And gestures are also a really good standalone exercise that can help you strengthen a variety of different artistic skills. So here are a few specific artistic abilities that doing gesture drawing as an exercise can help you improve. The first one is hand-eye coordination. Now the reason that it helps with hand-eye coordination is because you're doing these very quick strokes. You don't have a lot of time to, mess around with your line work and figure things out. You really have to be able to just look at the picture and then make a very intentional mark to define whatever you're trying to define. So it's really good for helping to develop that skill and develop your ability to look at a picture and put down a meaningful line that represents that picture. Similarly, it's also really going to help with your line quality. If you are one of those people that does like fuzzy little hairy lines where you're just kind of like hash marking your way down the line, this forces you to stop that because you don't have time for it. You have to be able to just put down, like I said, a very confident, quick mark for whatever you're trying to draw. You don't have time to be fuzzy and you don't have time to not be confident about it, basically. So it really puts you in a position where you're being forced to exude confidence in your line work, which is super helpful. You'll find that your marks will get smoother and they'll also get more intentional the longer that you do this as an exercise. Another thing that gesture drawing can really help you with is speed. And that makes sense because you're trying to capture the entire human form in just 1 or 2 minutes. But it also helps you kind of get into the mindset of an artist because you're forced to look at something and figure out very quickly how you would capture that on paper. So it really starts to train your brain to look at things and think about them in terms of how you would draw them, which is really useful, and it can help you build confidence as an artist, and it can help you work more quickly on your art in other areas too. So this it will translate to your painting and your drawing as well. Gesture drawing is also a really great way to supplement learning about anatomy because you're just kicking out these really quick little sketchy things. So for the basics of anatomy, like just how the proportions work, how long the arms should be and stuff like that, gesture drawing can really help you nail those down. Obviously, you're not going to have time to be drawing in all of the different muscle groups and facial features and stuff like that, but it's a really effective way to help you figure out the overall human proportions and get very comfortable drawing those. It's also really useful for learning how the body actually looks when it's in different positions or moving in different ways. And this is super useful just because it can help you build up a good backlog of poses that you can draw from imagination, or you can go back and look at your actual sketches that you did and reference your sketches directly. So it creates a physical library if you keep your drawings, and it also helps you to learn and absorb the information about how the body really works when it's moving. I'll also just share some tips that I find useful. Gesture drawing is one of those things that you can really do in a ton of different ways, so this all just applies to how I do it and what I've found to be most useful. So tip number one, I think that this is the most important thing about drawing gestures, is to focus on the overall pose and not get caught up in small details. The goal of a gesture drawing is to teach you to capture a pose and to teach you how the body works when it's in a certain position. So you aren't going to have time in a 2-minute window to capture the facial expression or the fingers or the toes. You really just want to focus on like the line of motion or the positions of the various body parts, rather than, the tiny details that would come later on in a piece. Tip number 2 is I always like to start with the torso when I'm doing a gesture drawing. The reason for this is that the torso is the center of everything else, so it really helps you to make sure that the drawing is going to be a good scale and in a good place on the paper. If you were to start with a head or an arm or something like that, it's going to be a lot easier for you to accidentally make the whole picture too big or to put it awkwardly on the page so that, some part of it is going to go off the page. So if you start with the torso, it's very easy for you to make sure that the whole image is going to be centered and is going to be a good scale for whatever paper you're working on. So tip number 3 is when you get to the limbs, draw through the lines. And what I mean by that is when you're drawing the limbs, draw the entire limb all the way back to where it connects to the torso, even if that means that you're drawing through another limb. And the reason that this is important is because it will really help you make sure that the limbs you're drawing actually connect to the torso where they're supposed to, and that they're the right size in proportion to the body. I very frequently see people try to treat gesture drawing like a contour drawing, where they just kind of draw the outside edges of the body. And when you do this, it's a lot harder for you to gauge whether you got the position of something correct. So always draw through your lines and connect the limbs back to the body. Tip number 4 is to mentally compare and check your work against the reference as you're going. And this one is a little bit harder to explain, but it's super useful for making sure that the whole piece is cohesive and proportionate. So what I mean by this is when you're looking at your reference and you're working on a specific part of the body, say a leg, look and see where it's positioned and how large it is in comparison to other parts of the body. So you might notice that the knee is falling directly beneath the elbow, so then you can look at the arm that you already drew and make sure that your leg is lining up underneath the elbow just like it is in your reference. And you also want to remember negative space here, so you can make comparisons between the negative space, which is the space between parts of the body, so the space between the legs is negative space, or between the torso and the arm is negative space. And you can make comparisons between your negative space and your body parts to make sure that those are also proportionate in your drawing. Tip number 5 is I would really recommend doing gesture drawing on a daily basis if you are able to. It doesn't have to take super long. I mean, the drawings are only 1 to 2 minutes each. So I usually like to go for about 30 minutes of gesture drawing. It's a really effective warm-up if you're a more advanced artist, and it's just really good practice if you are a less advanced artist. And if you can incorporate it into your daily practice or your daily drawing, I really think that you'll start to see the effects of it very quickly. Along with that, it's also important to make sure that you are analyzing and critiquing yourself afterwards. So once you have completed a session, go back and look at it and try to figure out what you can do better next time. Don't be afraid to give yourself these kinds of critiques. That's the best way that you're going to grow. Or if you have some artistic friends, you can show them your gestures and ask them, what recommendations they have for next time for you. And the last tip is to just have fun with it. Gesture drawing is super low pressure because you're only spending 1 to 2 minutes on these things. They're not going to be your best work, and they're not supposed to be your best work. They're just supposed to be a way to practically develop your skills. So definitely try to take it easy when you're working on this, and just have fun with it. Enjoy yourself. One last thing, I just want to share a couple of resources that I regularly use when I'm doing gesture drawing sessions. The first one is a YouTube channel called New Masters Academy. They have a whole bunch of videos that are just gesture drawing sessions. Basically, they're about 30 minutes long each, and they have really good model references, both nude and clothed. And they have timed sessions starting at 1 minute, and then it builds up to 10 minutes within this 30-minute video. So that's a really great resource. And then the other one that I use regularly is called quickposes.com, and they have a lot of adjustable settings so that you can kind of set up your own gesture drawing session based on what you want to do. And they have an enormous library, a lot of great reference, so definitely check them out too. And that is all I have to say about gesture drawing for today. If you have any thoughts or advice or resources for gesture drawing, please do share them below. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. And I will see you next time on the channel. I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye for now.